those end up kind of, inconsistent or incomplete for a summary, which is kind of what you want to have in your actual literature note archive. So like for chapter 9, I think I actually made like it was fairly long form, but then like that's not really what you want to go searching through when you're trying to remind yourself what the chapter is about. So there's even a more ultra condensed version at the top of my chapter 9 literature notes in my Ahrens 2017 file. That kind of feels like it's really converging on what Ahrens is talking about when he describes literature notes. So like I can kind of go to more and more depth into what I thought about it, but I probably don't need that. I mean, I'm like, when I refer to Ahrens sometime later, which I don't know that I ever will, but I can either point to like one of those super high level chapter summaries or just my in the end very overall summary, but it's all there in that one single file. Whereas before, when I first got into it, I thought I was supposed to keep individual concepts from literature notes in their own individual files. And I realized, no, that makes no sense. That's going to be impossible, which is what it felt like. It felt unmanageable.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Mark. I have it. I have two different implementations of it. I have my university one where it is an automatic thing, and this one where I thought I had set that. I thought I had changed that slider, but apparently I hadn't. So I will. But we are recording now, so there will be a video of this up on YouTube sometime this afternoon or evening. So yeah, I think I feel kind of connected to the text in a way, in a way where I sort of want to have a record and have these things in one place, because I think another thing that will do is sort of give me a sense of, what I got out of this particular book, right? This particular source, and, and maybe how the author organize their thoughts and develop their argument, and some things that I can say, if I'm thinking about the structure of that argument or anything like that. But yeah, I think that there's I'm not sure that it has as much of a place in this vault that's going to lead to my writing as maybe I had originally thought it did.
Yeah, I really feel like this is like this is more akin, my working through of this text is more akin to like what you would do for a course, where you're kind of forced to look at a bunch of aspects of stuff, and they aren't necessarily what you would have naturally been interested in, which is really what the slip box is talking about, is like cultivating your interests and reflections on those and connecting them with all the pieces of literature you use to build that up. I mean, I would have never naturally stuck this into my interest file as something I want to connect into a larger argument. It's just not, it's not my area,
Right. Yeah.
But like there is possibility to like the way he discusses in chapter 11, which I kind of think of the three that we read this week, chapter 11 is the weakest and hardest to understand from the way he's written it. Like the bridging of the ideas here, I do see a way they can connect to some other things, which I wouldn't have done, like wouldn't have thought without like this really close reading of trying to really get what he's talking about, which the text doesn't always make so easy, but I don't know, doing the work is good, like he says. So anyway, yeah. Next person, I guess.
Okay. Louis, do you want to describe kind of what you're doing and how maybe it's changed or maybe not because of this whole the ideas in here.
Do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, if you want to, I will make you a co-host. Let me see if I can do that. Where are you on the list here? There you are. Okay. Okay.
Shall I try?
Try now.
Yeah. Okay, I have to change my system preferences.
Yeah, that's one of my office kittens in the background. He just jumped up on the windowsill, which is behind the computer.
Okay, it says I have to quit and reopen. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, maybe we'll. Do you want to do that, or you want to not?
Maybe I will, because like if people are quite interested in seeing this map view.
Okay.
And like
Okay.
it's like.
Okay. Before you quit, why don't you pass the
Oh yeah.
pass it back to me, because otherwise I think it'll throw us all out.
Okay.
And we'll jump to Miguel, and then you can work on that in the background.
And Dan, you can just turn on screen sharing for everybody. You don't have to make folks co-host.
Can I? Where is that?
It should be in the share screen advanced.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, multiple participants can share simultaneously. Advanced sharing. All right. Screen share for all participants. Okay. Excellent. All right. Am I the host again? All right. Cool. Then Miguel, do you want to?
Sure. So this will be appropriate to give Lewis a chance to get out and go in. I have nothing to show, just to talk about, and I feel almost like I'm following the principle of do as I say, not as I do. But so the first thing I'll start out with was the there we go. Okay. Oh, that was interesting. So, there's Chris. Speak of the devil. I was mentioning Note Refactor. So, and I was actually going to suggest that you chime in on Note Refactor and how it's used. What I was going to start talking about was three things, two of which I think are very important, and one of which is just food for thought. So the first one is Note Refactor as a tool to use when you're taking notes, and to make sure that that the process is quite easy to break down, especially lengthier notes, into topics, or like atomic notes, as people will know them, that can be reused, and do it in a very systematic way. And Chris, you're familiar with the plugin, so I'll let you talk more about that. The second thing that I wanted to mention, this concept of tag notes. And I think some people might be a little confused as to why that would be an advantage to just linking. So the reason that the tag notes attracts me is it becomes kind of like an extremely good tool to be able to start writing on a particular topic. So the idea that I've got, and now I've got a video that I referred to here, Curtis McHale goes into this. It's not his original idea, it's someone else's. And the idea is that instead of tagging, what you do is you link to a particular note that covers a topic that you're interested in. So it could be a topic, it could be an article that you're writing. It's just anything that needs to group together a series of other notes. Now, if you include, while you're taking notes, a link to that topic, then you can bring those backlinks automatically into that topic note. And that means that once you go into that topic note, then you see every single other item in your vault that has to do with that particular topic. It makes it interesting from the conceptual perspective to see all of these items that you've got linked there, so that you can command click them open into a parallel window and see what's there. And then the second thing is just that it happens automatically. So you don't even have to worry about it. All you have to do is just make sure that you're linking to that particular topic. It's, I think, more powerful than tagging. Tagging will bring in a separate window to the side. It becomes a cohesive note of its own. So you can start writing on this particular topic, go down to the bottom. It's almost like seeing the footnotes to the article that you're writing on. So that's the second thing that I wanted to mention. And both of these things, the note refactor and the tag notes, that's work in progress for me. And the third thing I wanted to mention is something that I just popped in today. There's another developer who's created an Obsidian clone for all practical purposes called Tangents. And the interesting twist that he's given this application is he's embedded what I would call a dynamic mind map. So in the mind map, you're not simply seeing the structure of a note, you're actually seeing the structure of a directory or a series of notes. So there's a whole tree that's being drawn. And you've got the capacity to do two things. You can modify that tree on the fly. You can remove nodes. You can keep children. You can remove children, etc. So you're kind of creating a mind map workspace in a very selective fashion. And the interface also allows you, within the context of that mind map, to actually create new notes right then and there. The mind map plugins that exist already in Obsidian are purely reflections of what you already have, and they're also restricted to a particular note. In this case, the mind map in Tangents will actually show you a whole structure of the tree of notes that you've got. So that's what I've got to say.
Okay, let's see if this happens.
Yeah, that worked. Yeah, that worked.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I just have to unplug the camera and replug it. Technology is grand, isn't it? So in any case, these things strike me as kind of a the tag notes kind of struck me as a local map of content kind of / index thing. I do think that creating these index pages, I mean, this is almost like a project note for me in thinking that I am, that I'm preparing to write something and I'm pulling this stuff together, and I am, I'm going to these adjacent, I'm opening in a side window these connected notes and, and seeing what I think about them and bringing that content in. I'm always leery, and I'm always just kind of suspicious of adding more automation. So that's one of the reasons that I'm sort of slowly thinking about things that I've done, and it's kind of interesting because Gregory, there was when I posted that video, one of my YouTube, my regular YouTube people who respond a lot, and I'm not sure if she responded in the comments on the video or in Twitter, I don't recall now. Andrea Fajon, I think is the way she might pronounce her name, in, I don't know, Portugal or Brazil or someplace, was talking about how you had said something in the last video about sort of the difference between this Zettelkasten thing and the Nick Milo maps of content, kind of linking your thinking sort of sort of framework. And so I think that's one of the things that's sort of interesting about these ideas of how we, how we deal with this stuff, how we bring these things in, how we index, and also whether we use automation. Do you want to say anything about the since I brought it up, Gregory? Do you want to say anything about that idea of the of this difference? Is it a war, or is it just a difference?
Good question. People get very passionate about how things are approached when there's a online conversation, right? I think it's just how people want to use it and approach it, right? I think my impression, right, from reading, the book and, Luhmann's stuff, is that, if you're going to be a purist, you probably want to shy away from imposing any kind of top-down categorization or numbering system that represents categories. But I think a lot of people that have been attracted to the use of Zettelkasten, really do kind of want something that has at least high-level categories. Hence the typical MOC that has your 100 level notes, your 200 level notes, your 300 level notes, and so forth. So, I think the Luhmannian Zettelkasten really waits for those those notes that where you organize maybe other links to emerge much later. Whereas I've noticed people using MOCs tend to write the MOC first and then use that as sort of slots in which to place their notes, and that's where I think they've sort of moved away from the whole idea of emergence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have sort of been playing with the idea of sort of creating this little map of content in my own personal vault, and I've shown that in some of my videos, and I think that is. I'm actually sort of backing away from that. I'm sort of backing out of that, I think, because I'm finding that that these things that I had stuck in these little categories. I mean, I had thought I was making organic categories, right? Like, ideas from history, places from history, just a bunch of little separate things that I thought were demonstrated by the fact that I was finding commonality in a bunch of these notes that I just sort of written. But now I'm finding that things are sort of buried in there, and I'm actually sort of considering, maybe eliminating them all and just going back to kind of a flat surface where I tag things as, just maybe fleeting notes, literature notes, permanent notes, and see where that takes me. And maybe, and it's also possible. I'm also thinking that, maybe I'm way too early in the process, right? I've only got, probably fewer than 1,500 actual notes, right? So, so maybe I need another order of magnitude before I start to see, kind of these organic emergent things kind of happening.
I mean, my sense is that if you're going to have these high level categories, which I think are fine, if that's how you want to use it, but then you're using it more like Devon think, right? When you set that up for people familiar with that, so it becomes kind of a hybrid between a pure Zettelkasten and something like Devon think.
Right. Yeah. Or Notion, or that. Yeah. That sort of thing where you create the things first. Louis, are you ready to kind of show what you wanted to show?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm ready. I'll try and share my screen now. Yeah. So let's see.
Yep, I'm seeing it.
Okay, so yeah, just a quick overview of how I sort of write my notes and how they're organized in Obsidian. So I don't really use folders very much, very few, just separate out my journal, which is my work journal, and then all my notes just go in the notes folder. I have some other folders like for this book club, for some templates, and for data view plugin, which I'm sort of playing around with right now. And then I have these, so then I have these note names. So if I open the folder where the notes live, they come with a little tag at the front. So I guess it's like a tag system. So you can see in the file view like some of the basic types of notes. And if I'm looking at a bunch of notes in the local graph, then I can see kind of a little bit before, just by looking at the graph, types of different notes. So I know that this is like this one here, it's collector's fallacy that I'm over. It's like it's a definition. So, and then if I would go to, let's see, a note, an architectural note, then I can see this is Le Corbusier, famous 20th century architect. And I can see here, like the buildings that I've tagged in my note collection from him is Unité de Habitation. Yeah, so there. So like it helps me without doing a separate search. See the different types of notes that I have surrounding like the note that I'm looking at. So so yeah, that's about the content, the content symbols, and that comes from that inspired by Brian Jenks, who is a YouTuber. It has some interesting content there, and then I'm using this YAML front matter. So I think tags, aliases, CSS classes, and publish are supported in Obsidian right now. Yeah, and I hope that will be expanded later. Yeah, so like tags come, I'm using nested tags. So the tags are like the way that I sort of organize my, rather than folders, they're actually like separate out the main sets of my content. So like I have this knowledge, which is, I guess that's like basically every general note goes in there. So literary notes in the Zettel classing system would end up here, and then Zettels are here. And I guess this is all comes from the tagging system that I was using in Bear before I moved over to Obsidian. So like it's, I've kept it up here. And at least for me, I'm interested in buildings, of course, being an architect. I like to use map view. So like you can see, I'll just show you quickly how it works here. So like you can open a map of everything that's geolocated in your vault, and you can search by tag. And I don't actually use tags for that, at least not yet. So like maybe just on one. So like this is, you can only search by tag right now. So this is a tag for like map sites in Helsinki where I live. So then you can see, you can use this as a kind of alternative view. Instead of a graph view, you're using a map view. So like, for instance, I could, let's have a look. This is, okay, it's this building, turn of last century in Helsinki, Monkey Castle. So it will take you to the notes when you click on the geolocated note, and it, yeah, and that's so you can if you're interested in locations, it's actually a very good way to look around your notes too. It's an alternative way. Someone was asking about geodating, tagging with a geodate. So you might be able to do that. You can make a note with more than one tag. So instead of location and then the geo reference, you add locations in your YAML, and then you can add different points. So I tried to do this Amsterdam 1637 and Amsterdam 2000. 2000 is when I moved to Amsterdam, and 1637 is the height of the I think the tulip mania. And you should be able to, you see here, doesn't always work that well. So there's an Amsterdam 2000 and 1637. So you could either in separate notes or in exactly the same note, like tag different dates. Yeah, so
that's very cool.
Maybe that's my setup is not really it's not really a Zettelkasten at all. I haven't read the book previously, and you know, these notes come from a little bit from Notion, and then from Bear and into Obsidian, and actually a little bit like what Dan said earlier. I almost like think that maybe this is too fiddly, and I would like to maybe strip it back down, like 3 types of notes in their folders, and then the connections maybe a little bit clearer in the graph. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe that's all.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see. And I would mention that the middle school that I went to in southeastern Massachusetts was designed by Gropius, I believe, which was really weird. Very, very strange building. But yeah, I think that this is going to change probably as we have different tasks to do, right? As we have different, you know, and I'm thinking now of sort of what, you know, what's the end game for me in this particular project, and it's probably, you know, some type of a written kind of long form document in addition to my manual. So I think that probably is driving, you know, kind of what I'm interested in right this minute, and maybe will, you know, and maybe that will change after I get through that. After I get through that process and that project, yeah, and I think that that's okay, because I don't think, I mean, I think that the beauty of this really is that nothing is lost, right? That, you know, that if I sort of refactor and kind of change the way that that I organize these things, that, you know, that the information is still there for me. I mean, another project that I have is I've been working at getting, you know, archived stuff into a system, and so I think it's interesting to have at least the beginnings of a permanent note template that I can begin to use. Go ahead, Justin.
So I've taken to actually looking at the markdown files in Dropbox to prevent the conflicting copy problem that is proliferating in our vault. And a couple of things I noticed is, like, if you make heavy use of transclusion or other things that like mash notes together, like I wonder if this is like the tag notes thing. I don't know what they actually look like when you view them in Obsidian, but it gets actually really hard to read the underlying markdown file, which is mean, it's possible to extract the information, but things that are linked across by file name can be really hard to figure out where it actually belongs in the other file, because the file system in Dropbox doesn't provide you the link to the other file. And it's not a fully qualified path either because of Obsidian magic. So I'm kind of like reluctant to really go down this automation path also, because then it makes like, when Obsidian eventually dies, which I'm under no illusion that that technology is somehow permanent for the rest of my life, I don't want to be a little too tied to it, because I've been burned enough times already. I've been around that block, and I'm kind of tired of hitching my horse to that kind of cart. So anyway, that's all I want to say, I guess.
Miguel, and let me just say before you go that I just eliminated a bunch of conflicted change logs. I think that the change in the I actually opened the Dropbox folder and just grabbed them all and trashed them. I think that we're creating a lot of conflicted copies in that, just because I think a couple of people had the change log open on their local machines, and then whenever I open it, it seems like that just explodes. And then I try to close it very quickly as soon as I get my list, as soon as the list updates. But in any case,
quick pro tip that I've taken to doing is when I'm done with my session, I leave the vault open, but I click the X button in the upper right on any files in panes that I had open, so that I'm no longer like locally editing the file also.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, and I just go into the community plugins and turn it off, which I think is, probably, I think that probably works.
When two people are viewing the same file because of legacy or latency, like mine will save and then theirs will save and then Dropbox will sync and then there'll be a conflict. So like,
yeah. Go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing about the tag notes, by the way. It's not, I wouldn't really classify it as automation. So the key, what really triggered my mind was when you said that you don't like things that pull things in automatically. And so the way tag notes works is actually you're pushing manually these nodes into another topic node. But it's your choice. It's not something that happens automatically. What does happen automatically, if you so choose, is in that topic, that sort of long form article that I'm writing. I'm writing one. I'll use that as a demo if I get a chance. And at the bottom of the page, there's a plugin in Obsidian where you can say, hey, automatically show me all of the backlinks at the bottom of the page. And you can turn that on or turn it off. You can actually see the backlinks on the side panel as well. So that's the only automation on that side. But I see it more as like you're manually pushing these things into that topic page.
Right. Yeah, actually, when you added that, I wasn't using that before, and I stuck it in my own, my personal vault as well, because I think that is kind of nice just to have that reminder. Yeah, I've been very leery of automation. I mean, I didn't use Readwise for the longest time just because I thought, I don't want somebody else filling my thing. But now now that I'm thinking that, that there's this top level thing that is really only going to be me, right? Then the stuff beneath it, the stuff that is that's kind of pushing it in, is probably useful, and I can probably kind of live with. It is, what is that? Where is that plugin for that that you added? What's that?
Yeah, if you look at my tag notes, so under ideas, there's a tag notes as part of a permanent notes workflow note. I have the screenshots and everything in there for the backlinks. Yeah, it is a core plugin. Yep.
That's why I couldn't find it, because it's a core plugin. Okay, yeah, I was just looking for it, and it's like it's not on the community plugins list. Okay, thanks. So so I think this is I think this is interesting that I have, and actually I started also looking at kind of my my permanent notes separately, right? I made a little video on that, and Maggie actually reminded me that, yeah, you can do that with filters as well. And and my reaction to that was sort of, yeah, but it's not the same if I do it with filters, because then I've got to fiddle with them and change them, and it seems like it's like what I've done is I've grabbed a thing and I've said, this is the world that I'm building, and and the stuff that informs it is beneath that in these sort of subterranean levels now, which kind of appeal to me. Go ahead, Chris.
So I've been watching and noticing some patterns, both within our group as well as the bigger, broader groups. And one of and it's a trap we're all building for ourselves. And there are people, what we might call influencers, the Brian Jenks, the Nick Milos of the world, Tiago Forte is in that group. The people who are making mass videos on these things, and they tend to be doing it as they explore, and here's an idea, and Tag Notes is an example of that. Where they're playing around and they're creating interesting structures and things, but their local timeline for what's happening within either their own vault or their own usefulness has a very short timeline. So part of it is the problem of the tools we're using, whether it's Obsidian or Roam Research or Remnote or Evernote or whatever it is. There's a lot of functionality built into these. And I think a lot of people, the vast majority of people, are missing the forest for the trees in how they're using them. So they're literally throwing everything in the kitchen sink into their vault and hoping for the best. And Dan, you're probably a great example of somebody for whom I think the light switch has gone on in terms of at least what the Zettelkasten is and what it's meant to do. And you have kind of reformatted your vault to say, okay, here are my permanent notes. I'm going to link them together and do this thing. So you have the best tool in framing I think you've done for yourself in this last week is, okay, there's this thing called a Zettelkasten, and this is how it works. Here's the framing, and it doesn't need to be complex. And you've started tagging things and putting them in a space where you're doing just that functionality and nothing else. And I think in the long term, that's going to be a huge thing for you and your productivity and what you want the tool to do for you. And you're using really two tools. You're using Obsidian, and then you're using the Zettelkasten framing as a secondary tool and layer. Now you can throw everything else in there, and maybe you put all your fleeting notes somewhere else, or you have your calendar, your to-do lists, your productivity stuff, and you've got it somewhere separate, and you can kind of turn it all off so that you can focus and look at, here's my Zettelkasten and what's going on there, and leave all the other stuff off to the side. And I think by doing that and recognizing what you're using the tool for or the subtool within the tool, you'll do yourself a greater service. Because more often than not, I see people see or hear the idea of Zettelkasten and they don't get it. And then they start watching videos from other people and seeing patterns that others are using that there is no evidence to indicate that these things are really working for these people for certain outcomes. So if you want to write a novel or a book, or let's say in your case, Dan, a history book on a particular topic, those people are not using these tools for those things. And there's no evidence that what they're doing or the patterns they're using actually work. Whereas in the classical, at least German Zettelkasten framing, there is a huge list of people who have been using this particular technique in a very specific way, in a simple way, to have these long-term outcomes. Whereas Brian Jenks, there is no evidence I see of Brian Jenks using this as a mass outcome other than generating YouTube videos about the system itself. So I'm always leery when I see productivity experts or gurus saying, hey, do this or try this. They're interesting patterns, but I think unless you've got your eyes on the prize further down the road and you know what you're using the thing for, you're running into trouble. So even things like, Lewis has all these little, an ampersand in front of a title to indicate this is a person and it goes this place in my vault. What is the difference between doing that and putting a tag on that to say, hey, this is a person? And you can search for those two things, person and let's say architecture, and then you'll have all the people you've tagged as people in architecture, and you'll be able to find that and see it visually. But the other issue on the other side is by doing that, Lewis also makes it harder for his notes to match up with a broader category of people's notes. So his Corbusier is not going to match with any of ours because he's got a weird symbol in the middle of his title. So it's going to create like a shadow world as an example, or things like, and I wrote a little note on it, just the phrase tag note, the functionality of what it's doing and what it's accomplishing changes dramatically based on what your goal is for the notes you're taking. So it's mixing 4 different verbiages for 4 different notes. And I started teasing them out in terms of functionality. So there are people who are using these for commonplace book type notes. That's an interesting quote. I'm going to save that. I may use it again later. I need a way to find it and search to find that thing that I know, but I've forgotten it. That's one thing. The Zettelkasten framing is another. I want to use this tool as a thing for long-term writing and connecting interesting ideas as the backbone of a journal article or paper or book. That's a second thing. And then the third big one is wiki-like functionality. I'm learning a lot about a particular topic, and I want to have a top-down synopsis of, Corbusier and architecture. So I'm going to have a page, and all the things I find, I'm going to connect, and I'm going to put them into that page. And at the end, I'll have a nice little article. And there are overlaps in all of those functionalities meeting each other. And the tools we're using will facilitate all of those. But I think too many people I see are not deciding what it is I want out of the system. So they're throwing everything in it. And particularly, it's becoming worse because of all these videos of people showing these patterns. It's actually making things worse instead of making them better. And I'm probably one of the few people who I've seen point this out is Andy Matuszak is like, I have yet to see evidence of people using these tools for long-term actual gain. But yet here they are, they're calling themselves experts. So you can do that and throw everything in the kitchen sink into your system, but do it in a concerted way that you know exactly where things are going and you have a mental map of what you're doing and why, so that you can find the things when you need them and you can use these sub tools and sub ideas to do the things you want them to. Otherwise, you're just collecting a bunch of junk. And 4 years from now, you're going to look back and say, in fact, I've seen about 10 articles now. I've been collecting examples of people who are like, I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now, and I'm just throwing it away because I'm wasting my time.
Yeah. Well, I do think that I think that's good advice to sort of, for me to continue to ask myself, am I getting something out of this? Does this lead to to the outcome? And actually, I think now the fact that I am trying this month with this project to direct it towards an outcome is probably helpful, because another of the things, I mean, and I do want the function to happen first and then kind of the form to follow the function. And I think that, being enthusiastic about technology, right, it sort of makes it like, oh yeah, this I mean, and even Andy, right, sliding panes. I think that's a really cool idea. I have yet to actually use it. I mean, every once in a while I'll turn it on and then it's like, I'm not using this. And so, you know, and a lot of the things, you know, actually I've been looking, I think it's been fun for me and helpful to see the different ways that people structure their notes. In a lot of cases, I have a lot of questions about what's all that header information for example, right? What, you know, why do I need all that? Why do I need all that structure? And so I'm not, you know, so I've been sort of unconvinced about some of those things, and I haven't, you know, sort of adopted as many of them maybe as I might have previously. But yeah, I do think that that's a good that's a good caution, right? Is that, you know, what am I doing it for? I do like the idea of there being this local place, and sort of in the there's been some stuff going on in the chat about, you know, about kind of indexing and outlining and things like that. And I think that that's one of the, actually, if we, we're slightly more than halfway through. If we want to transfer a little bit or transition a little bit and talk and bring the book and the chapters, either the ones that we read last week or the ones that we read this week into it, you know, I think one of the things that Ahrens doesn't spend enough time addressing is kind of outlining, right? And sort of the way there's this magic, right, that theoretically happens, and it all kind of lines up for you. And I actually also wanted to kind of point to and ask people's opinions about this, because when I read chapter 9 struck me as sort of the example text of how to write a bad essay using a slip box. You know, that this is just like, oh, let's grab this, let's grab that, you know, that connected, oh, and yeah. I mean, I've seen some of those stories in Thinking Fast and Slow and in Anti-Fragile, and it seemed like he was writing it in this moment when people were talking about, you know, not just particular concepts, but particular examples, right? And so I'd be curious about kind of how you know, how people responded to what we've been reading. Go ahead, Justin.
I mean, I think because I was focused on really trying to practice like reading to understand on chapter 9, I didn't find the like sort of random asides that he inserted to be too long to distract from the actual like material content of it. And so like I didn't even really notice that it was a bad essay. I mean, it's a kind of a jumble of things, but they were ordered and they were interrelated to adjacent pieces of text. And so like I really got chapter 9, and I think chapter 9 and 10 are like the key chapters of the whole thing, even though like some of the other chapters, it would be really great if they were better.
Yeah.
But like then by chapter 11, it had reverted back to like really long asides that I don't really see the point of, or I know, because I know a lot more about Feynman, that he's actually missing some pretty important facts that would be super relevant here. He just doesn't know them, it seems. And things like that. So even though it may have been a bad essay if I was not reading so intensely, I found 9 to be really useful to me. So
I kind of found 10 that way. That okay, now he's laying things out and kind of putting them in order and in a way that, you know, that is kind of helping me.
10 was also really good for me, and then 11 kind of falls over.
So there's two things I think that some of those chapters have that are good examples of how to do things right and to do things wrong. So he had in one of the earlier chapters in a kind of an extended essay about how the shipping container changed global shipping.
The Malcolm McLean story, yeah.
Which is it's a brilliant analogy, and it's way out of left field, but it's also an example of how you can take the word box in your Zettelkasten and link one type of box to another type of box and show the power of those ideas colliding to create. Now, you can only take that example so far, or that metaphor so far, and do that. But it's a great example, yet he doesn't, to make it really worthwhile, he should have said, and I found this example of the shipping container in this metaphor because I'm using this system. And he doesn't do that. And to me, that's a total failure and loss of what's going on.
Well,
And then
and he like just goes on and on about it. And like if he had tightened that up to like really bring it to that point only and not a bunch of other stuff, like I would have been like, cool, you're not wasting my time. But it's like a page and a half or 2 pages of this or something.
Well, and then that's the second part is we're in this book, he's not saying it heavily, but you're decontextualizing ideas from an original setting to sift out the core idea, and you're saving that so that you can reuse it later. But then when you reuse it later, and I think this is the problem that Dan and I and some others probably had with chapter 9, is in recontextualizing it in chapter 9, he's doing a horrible job, and he's not drawing the lines to tell the story for the people who don't know what he already knows. And so it seems like a bad essay because he's taken these ideas and he's shoved them back into this thing and not done a good enough job of recreating a context around his ideas, which then becomes a failure. So in those two things, you can find great ideas and decontextualize them and put them in your slip box, but then you also then on the other side have to recontextualize them and do a good job of putting that thread back together.
Well, and also, I mean, it is an interesting metaphor, and you know, and that was another. That's another thing. That's another book that was written recently, right? The book Box, right? So you know, so again, it's sort of contemporary, but just as McLean sort of solved the problem from his perspective, right? He didn't like his trucks, you know, getting to a port and then having to have stevedores unload them and put them on a ship and move them back and take, you know, and then the ship gets someplace else. You take the stuff out, you put it in a new truck, and away you go, right? That's a time-consuming and kind of expensive process. It's also a super efficient process, right? And so the thing that's lost along the way is the really super efficiency of the way the stevedores were able to pack these ships, right? And so you lose that efficiency. So you actually create an inefficiency, which is, I mean, the inefficiency of it is basically overwhelmed by economies of scale.
Yeah,
right?
so
You can pick these things up.
You can afford to move ships this easily now, which you couldn't do before. You could only send a few sail ships, so you had to really maximize what you got out of it, right? And that's not mentioned here either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's you know, so there is a downside potentially in I mean, if we extend the analogy, or if we come to the other side of the analogy, right? There is this potential downside of less selectivity, right? But is, you know, and so is this inefficiency in the thing that he's analogizing to actually made up for by this potentially massively increased throughput, right? So I think that is, you know, and I think kind of broadly, I mean, I'm always sort of concerned about the domains of applicability of especially metaphors, right? And I don't know where I first ran. I think I first ran into this with Dawkins, right, where he sort of, you know, he sort of takes in the self, and it's actually in the book, I think, The Selfish Gene, where he first does it, right, where he takes this. Or it's one of those books. He takes this idea of, you know, of the way he understands genetics to be working, and then creates this idea of memetics, right? Which I don't know if it applies. You know, and it's sort of ironic that he's the guy who sat in the endowed chair of communication of science for Oxford, But I would, you know, and some people have said, "Oh, that memetics thing, it's a metaphor," and other people actually, you know, I mean, there's like a religion of you know, the meme out there. There are people who believe it very, very, very literally. Tim, did you want to throw something in there? Well, let me catch up with what's going on, Patrick. Patrick and Stan. What's happening in the chat? Somebody bring us up to speed on what's going on in the chat.
Mostly discussion about the shipping containers.
Okay.
Someone posted a YouTube video with an opposite point of view on how it's broken.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's been in a sailboat and run into a floating shipping container probably would agree with you.
Someone referred to Ahrens as Arenas, so now he's he's a Latin American.
Oh, and the extraneous repetitive text. I do think that it's yeah. I don't know that it's, you know, again, maybe that's not in that same chapter where the shipping container metaphor is. He talks about, you know, kind of top down and bottom up organization, right? So so that sort of applies to what we were talking about earlier, right? The idea of, you know, are you going out looking for one specific thing in the world, or are you open to what it is that appears when you go out looking for anything that can be useful? So in the jumping back to the more recent chapters, 10 did seem to me to be more, you know, some more specific things that I could, you know, that I could use like with my students. So that one I felt much better about. Go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, so going back to what Chris was saying, there's a key point there, which is what's the context of your note taking, right? I'm interested in I've got a few different vaults, as a matter of fact. It would be ideal to find a single system for all of them, so I know what options or plugins I need to plug in all the time, et cetera. And it really doesn't happen that way. So I've got a startup with a co-founder, and I've got a series of plugins that I've configured there. And I've got a process of taking notes that's completely different from the one I have where I'm preparing an article. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think also it's fallacious to think, you know, there is a great way to note take. If you want to become a writer, right, you look at what your writers have done, independent of Obsidian or index cards or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's part of the gist of it too, is that, you know, maybe one size can't fit all, right? Maybe there isn't a thing in. So maybe, you know, my you know, maybe as I take the stuff out of here, you know, that I think I want to put in in the next book that my wife has convinced me to go back to and write, and not the one that I was planning on. She really loves the secular radicals, this transatlantic thing, and I was really focusing on that for a long time. And then I went someplace else, and she, you know, and so she's like, you know, you knew so much about them. Why don't you take advantage of that? So I may go back to that. But what I do with them in the vault, you know, with the idea that it's leading to me being able to say something about them, you know, and to create this output. Maybe that is, you know, just that different from what I would do if I were, you know, organizing the information I needed to, you know, to make decisions or run a business or something like that. You know, maybe that is, you know, I was thinking maybe I'll write a, you know, a kind of a note-taking guide, you know, or a note-taking course, right? And then maybe, I mean, it's possible that would be different for, and I was thinking about this a little bit last week after our discussion, you know, maybe that would be different content for my students than it would be, you know, for a bunch of, adults, right? For a bunch of my, my YouTube viewers. Maybe that is not this, maybe even that, about generally kind of the same concept is not, close enough. So yeah, maybe it's all, maybe a lot of this has to do with people trying to shoehorn functions into forms that they've been able to build.
Yeah, I mean, that's another good example too of some people will highlight something because it's a fact they want to remember, and then they want to throw it into maybe a spaced repetition system so they can review it a couple of times so that it sticks. And that's one slim use case, especially if you're a student, for taking notes. But that has zero to do with the type of functionality that a Zettelkasten would be used for. Or you could use those simple facts that you're collecting as examples and sit them off to one side and maybe connect them to a few of your ideas, so that if you're writing, let's say in your case, Dan, a history book, you have a few core ideas that are the backbone of the book, and those you're going to find in your slips. But you're going to need the evidence and facts and backup as examples for those things to say, hey, here's the proof, here's the evidence.
Yeah.
So you need to have that and collect it and then connect it in some way, but you've got to do it in a way that makes sense so that it's all refindable. And your use case is going to be dramatically different even than the history student who's doing it because they're taking notes for a specific course.
Yeah, they're going to take a test. Yeah.
And then, ideally, if you're a history student and doing it for courses, then you've also got that as a repository so that when you go to write your PhD thesis or write papers later in your life, you still have all that stuff. You just reclassify it because you're using it in a different context at a different time. So it's a lot of it's all about that. It goes back to that context for me, at least.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and there are some similarities, right? Because theoretically, the type of thing that you do with your field reading, right, is not only to prepare yourself to, to understand the historiography of of kind of a general field, so that you can then kind of plunk that down and establish your credibility for whatever intervention or contribution you're going to make to that conversation, in a dissertation or a monograph or something. But then it becomes sort of different when, it was very valuable for me to, to have those things close to hand, so that, when I, am designing a course, right, I can stick some of that in. But, and maybe to some extent it's a question of editing, right, where the things that the things that we've seen Ahrens doing, in some of these chapters, and the things that that people have complained that Luhmann is doing were just not as well contextualized, as somebody just said recently a couple of minutes ago about chapter 9, right? That that it could have been more effective. Justin, did you say that? That if it, if he had, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm losing track here. That that things could have, that things. I mean, because, and that's one of the kind of struggles I've had, sort of conceptualizing permanent notes, because initially I was thinking of them as, sort of my, and maybe it was partly from reading Andy, right? I was thinking of them as my sort of, really kind of pithy, moments where I kind of condense this thing into a, into a transcendent kind of atomic statement of my own. And now I'm sort of broadening that to be more about, no, these are the building blocks of, of an argument or of a narrative, or, but these are the things that I want to be able to sort of, these are the note cards that I want to be able to put down on the table and say, okay, that goes there and that goes there. And oh yeah, that leads to that. And then rearrange them. I did that. I mean, ironically, I didn't have these tools when I wrote my last big project. I had the thing with the corkboard note thing, Scrivener, right? So, so I had the corkboards and the little notes on that, and I put, and each one of them had its own. I mean, and it was limited in size. So, so that is.
I'm waiting for that index card printer, so I can just hit print on my thing, and it'll just spit out all the index cards, and then I can order them and have the physical version as well as the digital version, so you can have the tangential feel of moving things around.
You can use the digital tool to go back to the old mechanical world.
Yeah.
You can totally already do that, Chris. Like most laser printers, any laser printer that has a slider for the paper feed, you can actually set it down to index card size.
Yeah, and I guess you could go back to your original, text file folder and just say, print all these files, and here's the format.
If you're a maniac like me, you'd probably make a little script to convert it to LaTeX and format it exactly how you want it, and print it all out. Yeah, get PDFs and paper version. But I like it. I want a paper version.
No one could hear it, but my wife just on the side said, "Oh, somebody said LaTeX. These are definitely your people."
Yeah. So, yeah, actually, I just, who was it?
Hey, Louis, I'm thinking with sorry, not Louis. I forgot who mentioned or maybe Justin mentioned the printing out the index cards, and you could use Louis's map plugin to know where that index card is located.
Yeah. Actually, a map, and going back to that, the whole map and date and geo code thing, I would love it if there were a more effective timeline map view combination thing. I mean, National Geo, somebody has a oh no, it's ArcGIS has a thing that kind of almost has that capability. But yeah, for history, that would be great. Yeah, HyperCard was and actually, who was it that just wrote an article recently about HyperCard? Sort of remembering HyperCard. I think it was a Jason Possible or one of those blogs that I think.
You should try the Knight Foundation. I think has timeline.js will do that, and it will give you, I think the UI basically is an Excel spreadsheet, and you can put in names and dates and then descriptions and add photos and fun stuff, and it'll give you a very pretty online timeline view, which I've done and exported data. I had a Tiddlywiki that I used it and exported data from specific cards to that tool to give a nice visual, and they do it in an online timeline, and then you can skip around and it'll shift through cards. It's very slick.
Yeah.
And the point of contact is Michael in the Knight Foundation.
Okay.
Wait, oh, sorry. That was a Knight Rider joke.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, that came at me from left field. Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah. So, are we then close enough together on what it is we're all trying? I mean, I think what we've established here is that what we're doing is going to be very specifically tied to our goals and our and our output aims. And so, are we close enough together that the things that we're seeing in the vault that each of us are doing are being useful and helpful? How are you guys finding it?
I mean, I've seen snatches of things that other people are doing that I will be able to pick up. But I think it's really just a like community exercise of all of us sharing our individual thoughts and trying to project them into the system is what's been actually pretty helpful to me. Having a space to like try it out and like a short, like it's only a month we're doing this, so like it's not like I'm committing to doing this for the next 10 years of my life or anything. I'm like experimenting quite heavily and seeing progress, which has been really great. But yeah, I wonder how much of like, I don't think we're all going to end up on the same system, and I don't think we should either. We really need to tie it to our own individual use and the way we individually work, which is a point that is not emphasized much at all in education.
Right.
So, yeah, that's my kind of response.
Okay. I've been finding things that I've been applying to my own, and I have actually kind of picked up a bunch of. I guess I've challenged myself to think about this. I mean, I only adopted this little map of content that I made for myself about a month ago. So now I think this has forced me to rethink it. So that's been helpful. Yeah, I do think that. Actually, I'm just kind of looking at your week 3 stuff, Justin. Anybody using Obsidian extensively on a tablet or using the mobile? How's that work?
All the time. So I had to switch to the insider build. I paid for the catalysts this week, so I could actually get like the same kind of preview stuff, and then some plugins would actually work correctly and stuff like that. So far it's good. There are a couple of things that are not quite perfect, but just wish it would integrate with Dropbox. Yeah, I've been playing with it, but so far it's just been play, because whenever I've wanted to do something, substantial. I also don't like typing on the thing that I have connected to my iPad, I guess. So I only come to the laptop to work with the Vault for this course. I do everything else on my iPad and phone.
I've got it syncing on my Windows machine, on my iPad, and my iPhone. The syncing is very fast. I'm using the Obsidian syncing, and it works really well. Aside from and the iPhone being extremely cumbersome to type anything, it's really, really good.
Does the I usually just dictate to my iPhone. Does that work for you at all?
I haven't tried it. So that's a great idea. I'll try it out.
Stan, you wanted to throw something?
Yeah, sorry, Stan. I do find that the command palette is what enables me to use the iPad, because otherwise it is clunky.
By the way, Dan, I just noticed the map plugin allows you to filter by tag.
Oh.
So you could conceivably put in a tag for a year, in which case then you can see something, in the year 1950, and it'll just show you those locations, and then the year 1975. Interesting.
Yeah, that
absolutely will do that. So you could tag a note with the dates, and it will only show up and then filter that tag. Absolutely do that. Yeah.
Cool. Stan, did you want to throw something in?
You're muted.
I think you're muted still.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I guess the one thing about this week, yes, at least for me, 9 was a poorly written essay. But the one thing that it motivated me to do, and I guess, what I found was going back to the, shared vault, and although I haven't contributed a lot, what it really forced me to do is to go back and work on cleaning up my own and separating out the two vaults that I have. One is for managing my office and my office staff, and then, you know, my academic work, you know, students and research and, you know, publications and the like. And so the, you know, management aspects, and I've, you know, been keeping the academic stuff separate. You know, I've tried and I've discovered, and from the discussion here today, you know, I've really come to accept that, you know, although I've tried to keep the set of plugins the same, it's, you know, I haven't used the same in both, and so there's no point. There's no point in trying to make them the same, because the functionality in each of the vaults, you know, is really, it's, you know, really completely different. And, you know, I wish I could remember the other point I was trying to make, but I got interrupted, and so I lost it. So it can't have been too important.
It'll come back. Okay. Well, we're coming close to the half hour. So.
Oh, I know what it was.
Okay.
You know, it was about syncing across different platforms, and I guess so I have Android phone, MacBooks, and Linux implementations, and you know, other than the transgression of, you know, leaving the vault open and creating these multiple copies, which I now know I won't do. You know, syncing between these three different, you know, flavors of systems, the Linux, Macs, or Android phones I've had, you know, it's really been seamless, at least for me.
Good. One of the things that I'm interested in a little bit is the output, right? Is that, you know, and I've played around a little bit with Publish. I just put the last week? I don't know, time's getting crazy for me, but I put the last book club stuff up on Publish recently, and oh, good. And I you know, so I am kind of interested in, and I had done that before with part of my, and that was actually the other instance where I had used the folder, you know, the internal folder as a vault thing separately, because I actually had figured out what I was going to put into the thing that I was publishing out. And then I had just published, I had opened that folder only and published that out. So I guess maybe that's another use case for opening internal folders. But yeah, I'm interested. I'm also kind of interested in this, you know, taking the stuff that we have, and then, you know, and then finding a way to, you know, kind of bring this to the world. So that I think that will be increasingly.
You mean from this vault, or do you mean like in general, like how do you?
I just mean in general. I just mean if I think ultimately, you know, this vault ultimately will be, you know, like the other one, when it's all over and done with, I'll just probably, you know, throw the whole thing up there.
So getting it out of the vault, I recommend reading chapter 9 too, because that's all about how you do the writing. That's a joke, but
thank you. Just connect those things up and jam them out there. Yeah.
I saw where it's that note.
It is kind of an interesting process of you know, thinking about chapter 9 and thinking about, you know, what would I have done to make more context and to make more space around these ideas so that they did, because I thought a couple of times I thought, well, this is, you know, okay, now that I go back to it, I can see what he's doing. I can see why he's dwelling on this and dwelling on this and dwelling on this. And then boom, there's the payoff, right? There's the way that it connects to this argument that he's making. But it was...
I mean, I think a little bit of it's like maybe his own focus on that chapter and tightening it up. But I think another thing, he really would have benefited from hiring an editor and charging them with helping him make that text more effective. And I mean, if he hired one, he hired a bad one. So.
Yeah. And it depends on when, I don't know. I mean, I have used CreateSpace in the past. And early on, there were a lot of kind of add-on services that you could purchase, right? And I think maybe that changed over time because I used it before. I mean, I think I imagine he went through that process in like 2016. So, you know, maybe that's different. But then, you know, I mean, they went through this multi-year transition to whatever the heck it is now, Kindle Direct Publish, which is very, I mean, it's very weird. It's very ebook focused, which is a whole different, I mean, it's basically putting that technology cart in front of the horse to some extent, again, so.
Well, they don't tell you, but there's 2 levels for that Kindle Direct Publish. And a big underlying chunk of it is not available to the public. So they literally, they reach out to agents and producers and editors to get them into their system. So let's say if I represented Dan Brown, they would have sent me an email to say, hey, Dan should release his next book through us. And we'll give you a nice big piece of the pie to keep him exclusive. And the terms they offer are ridiculously silly. Or if you have older books that are out of print, you can send them a copy to a facility in Arkansas, I think, and they will strip the book, copy it, OCR it, and give you the exact same formatting for free. And then here's a button and you just push publish and your book is now back in print in electronic format. But they don't tell anyone. You have to be contacted by them to even know that exists.
Right. So that's actually publishing. That's not self-publishing anymore. Yeah. Stan.
Changing subjects, though, you know, I was listening to your summary this morning of last week's session. And, you know, at the end, when the music started to come up, you were making a statement, Dan, about capturing or writing, you know, 6 permanent notes per day, or something to that effect.
Oh yeah, give myself a quota. Yeah.
And I was wondering where that came from. I mean, was that just a number you came up with, or?
No, that was in the text. There's a point at which Ahrens says that you know, that Luhmann got 90,000 notes. And if you do the math, if you basically reverse engineer the math, over the period of his career, that meant that he only had to make 6 notes a day.
Okay, yeah. Well,
I just like to set goals.
Yeah, I thought it came from the book, but I just wasn't sure. So
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. It was either from the book or it was from something that I've heard him say either in an interview or in RBC2, but I think it was in the book somewhere. Yeah. I think, I like setting myself goals. I haven't really, it's kind of weird. When I used Rome, I used to have like little sliders and checkboxes and all kinds of stuff. I don't do quite as much of that. I don't do quite as much of that, sort of personally managing my life in the day, in the morning pages, section of my daily notes and all of that in Obsidian anymore. But yeah, that is a thing that I would like to get, and especially now that I'm sort of changing my thinking and thinking that, a lot of this stuff that I have dumped into these folders, I'm going to bring back up, because one of the things that I'm finding is that a lot of these things are, 90% of their way to being permanent notes and things that I will use when I write something. And so, so just that kind of little shift in the way I'm conceptualizing them, makes me want to take them and, and raise them up to this level as quickly as I can to again, see if I can make all of this magic start to happen.
So like, like one of the points they make in chapter 11 is about integrating them in your notes or in your permanent notes file as you go, rather than like making it a project and going back, because that like you have different perspectives on the days you're putting it in, like 3 years ago versus today. I guess you're trying to like front load everything you've already done, but it won't be the same kind of connections you would make organically as you're just kind of noticing what you noticed that day and connecting it. Right?
No, that's probably true. But the things, the things that I'm bringing back from here, I am sort of bringing them back with the goal in mind that, that I've got this, this sort of project that I kind of want to work on. Yeah, I think that has been there are some things. I can't just go through from top to bottom of my vault and say, I will take every one of these and I will turn it into something, because some of them, are just not amenable to that. Some of them I'm not that interested in. Some of them I don't have anything kind of unique or insightful to say about that. Where was Kathy at the end of chapter 11? Maybe she, what is it? Editing can mean a lot of things. There are very few typos in here, so she could have been a line editor. So anyway, it is 11:35, so we should probably wrap up. Anybody want to have the last word? All right, well then, thank you for taking the time. We will do this again next week. I'm thinking that maybe the following week, we might have to push a week because I may be out of town, but I might be able to come back. I'm going to a conference that's Thursday, Friday. I don't know if I can get back by this time on Saturday, but I will. I'll think about that and definitely plan ahead for it. So thanks for being here, and I'll process this and I'll put it up for the folks who weren't able to make it, and see you in the vault this week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.